The People's National Congress Reform, PNCR, presents Nation Watch.
Our viewers, we wish to greet you. From Uganda, it's a good evening. It's 7 p.m. And as far as I know, in Guyana, it's midday. In Washington, it's 11 a.m. We are privileged to have with us Honorable Member of Parliament and by the names of Aubrey Norton. But before we dig deep rather into our discussion today, definitely we are streaming live from our social media pages. That's the Alternative Uganda, and from Uganda in particular as a country found in East Africa and Africa as a continent. We had to have this show so that we can have Afro-Caribbean links, so that we can share experiences, what is happening in the Caribbean countries and also what is happening in Africa. My co-host should be in position to introduce himself, and then we shall proceed to Honorable.
A very good evening, good morning, and good afternoon, depending on where you're watching us from. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Roger Sturiabwe, and I have the privilege today to be in discussion with Mr. Norman Tumindise and the good honorable and the leader of the opposition in the country of Guyana, in the Caribbean country. It is good to connect today, and I think it is time to have the honorable say hello to our viewers and introduce himself just a bit about himself. Honorable.
Honorable, back to you so that you can introduce yourself to our viewers.
Well, let me say hello. I'm happy to be on this program. I do believe there is a need for a link between Africa and the Caribbean, and I'm glad that this medium is one that is being utilized to link Africa and the Caribbean, as we have natural and other linkages.
Thank you. That's a good one. We really thank you for creating space. We know you are one of those busiest people in the Guyana, but also we cannot take your time for granted. Thanks once again. We are going to begin with your address to the Congress, which happened some good days ago. And then that will lead us into our discussion, where you had lots of concerns about the national budget and the entire allocations of your country's resources. Thereafter, we shall have some questions in regards to your submissions to the Congress. Let's ask our technical team to have this short clip, as you made your submissions in the Congress, and then we shall begin from there.
It is our considered opinion that this budget is a dismal failure. I've mentioned what it has done, what it will do in terms of inflation. But most importantly, the resources of this country, they are not meeting the people. I would have thought that in this circumstance, he will have also been announcing wage increases for the year, because the 8% we know is inadequate and is a serious problem. Now, you announcing that you will, the temporary part-time employment program, that in itself is an indication that the government had failed. This government didn't promise people part-time jobs. They promised to reduce unemployment. And so to come now and celebrating that you're adding some funds on a part-time job, you're celebrating a program that is indicative of the fact that the government has failed. Now, they are talking about sustainable development. What sustainable development? There are no measures in this budget to suggest that Guyana is going to develop sustainably. And in large measure, this budget looks like it is inviting Dutch disease. It looks like it is inviting Dutch disease. Critical to moving this economy forward is advancement in manufacturing. To talk about agriculture in pure primary product context, will not help us. We have to have situations where we can move from primary agricultural products to processed agricultural products, and manufacturing should have been critical. And though the minister pointed out that there has been little or no improvement in manufacturing, you did not see measures in this budget to improve the manufacturing sector. And you know full well that manufacturing is dependent on cheap electricity, and there is no evidence that there's going to be a reduction in the cost of electricity. Now, the thing that is most glaring here is that there is a heavy emphasis on infrastructure. That suggests to me the PPP intends to continue its corruption. This is a budget. At minimum, 25% of that 700 and something billion will end up in corruption, apart from the incompetence. And so this budget will give no hope to the people of Guyana. One would have anticipated that with these resources, we would have heard of the return of free education to the University of Guyana. There is no such thing. And so we need to not fool ourselves. When people say the fastest growing economy in the world, it doesn't make any sense unless it impacts the lives of the people. And I submit, it isn't and it will not. So there are a lot of issues here that we will have to look at. Education, to me, should have had more focus, particularly developing the human resource capability to audit and monitor the oil sector. There is no evidence or suggestion in this budget that we are preparing to monitor and audit the oil sector properly, and therefore increase what we get from coarse oil. This budget was a long speech that consumed a lot of time, but it cannot achieve what should be achieved, which is a higher quality or a better quality life for the people of Guyana. It's going to put money in the hands of the PPP elites and their cronies, but the people of Guyana will continue to face high cost of living and will not be able to make ends meet in Guyana today, and that is where the issue lies. The rest I will deal with in my budget presentation. A very critical issue is poverty. All the reports, IDB, every report is establishing that poverty is on the increase. And all you can get in this budget is something that suggests money to study poverty. I mean, it's ridiculous. This budget has no program for poverty alleviation nor poverty reduction. What should have already been done was for there to be people out there identifying the areas in which poverty is high, and then the budget should have had programs to deal with poverty and reduce poverty. And so this budget is found wanting when it comes to the need for measures to attenuate, alleviate, and ultimately eradicate poverty. This seems to be a budget for the rich.
That is some interesting facts from you, Honorable. And in response, we wanted to also have a response that was given by Mr. President when he was responding to your budget presentation about a number of issues. So I'm going to also have our technical team play that so we can have a balanced discussion and understand the perspectives, so that you can give us a real picture of what this budget is like and what is missing exactly. From what I have read so far, it is to the effect that it is so far the largest budget in the history of Guyana. So what could be the problem? So I'm going to request the people in the control room to play that response by the President.
I take them as my friends and family, because every Guyanese is my friend and family. So yes, Mr. Norton, the 25,000 that will be getting their house lot under this government is our friend and family, because in your 5 years of government, you failed to give any of them anything. So I take them. They are my friends and family. You are part of this great One Guyana family, and I'm happy that the opposition leaders finally realized that all of these people form part of this one big, happy Guyana family, the One Guyana family. So I'm not looking at it as a negative. You know your president. I don't look at anything in a negative way. What the man was really saying was that Guyana and the delivery of Budget 2023 is for the entire Guyanese friend and family. He's accepting the fact that the PPP government has embraced the entire Guyana community as our friend and family.
That was President Dr. Irfan Ali during a press conference on Thursday when he was asked to respond to opposition leader Aubrey Norton's comments on Budget 2023. According to the head of state, the government's policies and programs outlined in Budget 2023 are all geared towards positively impacting Guyanese all across Guyana.
The movement of the threshold from 75,000 to 85,000 that will benefit tens of thousands of Guyanese, they are my friends and family. I love them. Do not claim them as your friends and family. You said that they are our friends and family, so they are my friends and family. Let's go on. The Because We Care grant that will benefit 214,000 school children, 214,000 families, they are my friends and family. I love you guys. You are my friends and family. The thousands of consumers who will benefit as a result of the reduction in the freight costs, you are our friends and family. Yes. Yes, Mr. Norton, they are our friends and family. Every Guyanese is part of our family and friends.
Against this backdrop, President Ali posited that by saying the proposed budget would benefit the friends and family of the government, Norton is in fact finally accepting that Budget 2023 has delivered for all Guyanese under the One Guyana initiative.
This man has finally come to his realization and the reality that this budget and this government is delivering to the friends and family of the PPP who constitute the entire whole of the country. All the Amerindian communities in Amerindian that would benefit. The Because We Care grant, the school transportation grant, the income tax threshold adjustment, the salary adjustment, the expansion of the part-time job program, $10 billion. $10 billion going back into the pockets of people, improving disposable income. What that means is $40,000. Any of you have a low-income loan here? $40,000 would pay back your loan every single month. That is what it means for the ordinary people. Yes, they are friends and family. Yes, they are part of the Guyana collective, friends and family. I am happy. You're misinterpreting the man.
Reporting for the Evening News, Vanu Manikchand.
Thank you for your time. Definitely, we cannot thank you enough, Honorable. Now, a quick one. You see, it's a tricky one. The tempers are so high up there. So sometimes you even wonder, what exactly is the problem? Is it as in, is there a big issue that is making you conflict, for lack of another word? Because we now see you have concerns about this very budget. And then one asks, how best would you have appropriated this amount or this entire budget in regards to developing your country as Guyana? Because literally, I heard you talk about education and infrastructure and the rest, which in the president's view is like you either misunderstood what this budget was meant for, because to him he's like, it's a pro-people budget. What do you have to say? How, if you were the president of Guyana, how best do you think you and your party would have appropriated properly for purposes of developing Guyana using this very budget or otherwise? Back to you, Honorable Norton.
Okay, first of all, one has to recognize that the budget we is 781.9 billion Guyana dollars. What that means, it's a lot of money. If you decide that $2 billion for, or this is $5 billion for relief for the people of Guyana, that is below 1% of the budget. How are you going to, we have argued that we have a people-centered approach to development in which we will put resources in the hands of the people. Here is a president that allocates below 1% of the budget in direct benefits to the people and then tries to swing it to suggest they are looking after the people. They are not. When we say that this budget is for the friends, families, and favorites of the PPP, is that little elite that through construction and infrastructure will carry away just around 50% of jet. Through projects, we have said a good bit through corruption. You cannot therefore argue that you are a friend of the people and the people you are talking about are your favorite. They aren't. The allocation in this budget should have been done differently. For instance, I have a number of arguments against the budget. One, that it does not help with the cost of living. And where I allocate the resources, a larger percentage would have been allocated to people directly in terms of cost of living. For instance, Guyana had free education, didn't stop it. If it had returned free education to university, etc., that will impact the society, the wider society, in a positive way. We also said that there are a lot of students who can afford to go to the university. Even if you give them free education, they need resources to travel, etc. We were allocated resources for them to travel. We believe that in a direct way, we need to improve the lives of our people. Let us understand that people need direct inputs so that they can benefit from it. What government is arguing is that it will fuel inflation. Our approach, our people-centered approach, as I outlined in my budget speech, we gave a number of measures that will increase production, bring down the cost to fight inflation. One of the arguments we have against this budget is that it has little or no measures to fight inflation. And even the little money they are talking about putting in some regard, will be in trouble because they have no anti-inflationary measures. So it is not just a question of putting money in the hands of the people. One has to simultaneously develop measures which I've outlined in my budget speech that will contribute to increase production, bringing down the cost of goods, reducing inflation. So while we are advocating for resources to go to our people, we are not advocating it in a vacuum. We are advocating it with an anti-inflationary policy so that the real income of our people will go up. What has happened is the resources that were provided, they are little. Apart from being little, they are done with no anti-inflationary measures, and therefore inflation will eat out the real income of the people. And that is the critical question that the government fails to deal with. We have also said that one of the most critical issues is poverty. And therefore, in my budget presentation, I outline a number of measures that should be taken to combat poverty. I said, first of all, we need to conduct a national poverty survey to understand poverty in Ghana and then target it. We suggested in the presentation that we need to educate those in poverty in financial literacy and small business management and give them the resources to become involved in small businesses so that they can contribute to their own development. We felt more, the president had promised 20% budget will go to education. He did not put 20% of the budget in education. It was way below that. So what that means is that the human resource development that is needed isn't present. What that means, Ghana has a high level of illiteracy, and we felt money should be placed into literacy programs, ensure that you develop the literacy level of the population in the process of creating a better Guyana. We propose develop projects in impoverished community to lift them out of poverty, using job creation and the promotion of micro and small businesses. Nothing like that is occurring. And even when the president talks about this $40,000, he is going on like if it is 40,000 added to people's income. These are people who have no income. The government gives a part-time job of 10 days a month for the 40,000, so the people have got to eke out their existence from that 40,000. But anybody listening to him at a distance would believe it is 40,000 on their salaries. These are not people that are getting a salary. And the people that are getting a salary, the increase is way below anything like 40,000. At maximum, it's going to be about $7,000. The increase in public assistance is 2,000 Guyana dollars, which is negligible. And so what the government is seeking to do is to really spin the reality to make it look like a positive. The budget has no measures to deal with poverty. It has no measures to cushion the cost of living. And worse yet, it has no anti-inflationary measures. The budget focuses on infrastructure development and not in a structured way. It is discriminatory in nature. It's in a lot of the communities that are controlled by the People's Progressive Party, which is dominated by one ethnic group in Guyana. That is why we say the government is incompetent, it's corrupt, and it's divisive.
Honorable, I have this for you, and I want you to clear these two questions before I cross to my co-host. First of all, I want to believe that just like Uganda is here in Africa, that a parliament constitutes of both opposition and the government. But in particular here, I want to talk about the National Budget Committee, which I want to suppose that every parliament or Congress must have both. For instance, in our country here, when the government is making a budget, there is a parliamentary committee in charge of that in particular, where the opposition forwards its suggestions as they, make the entire budget. Isn't it the same formula that you have in Guyana, that perhaps your ideas should have appeared and featured into the national budget ideas when the committee was sitting, so that your ideas were, incorporated with the national budget? If no, what could have caused the drop of your ideas if you had some before this budget was approved?
Well, first of all, Ghana is not a democracy, though the government parades as if they are democratic. There is no mechanism for budget in Guyana. More importantly, previously you would have had some amount of consultation with the opposition. There is no consultation with the opposition. The government has 51% in the parliament, and they operate. They basically say, you can have your say and we will have our way. There is no conversation on the budget to get inputs from the opposition. In fact, the keys that we would have made were done in the public domain. Also remember, in Guyana, opposition has no access to state media. The government dominates state media and deprives the opposition of access to what should be the people's media. And so one of the things people in Africa must understand is that when you're talking about Ghana, you're not talking about a democracy. You're talking about a government that believes in domination and control. And every day the government eats away at whatever semblance of democracy exists. Only recently recently the government refused to engage one of the African Guyanese communities, Mocha, and demolish the buildings of people in a very arbitrary, arrogant way. And they still continue after that to talk about one Guyana. How do you create one Guyana? When you are deliberately destroying and marginalizing the African Guyanese with the hope of giving a few African Guyanese pittance, and then argue that there is one Guyana. If you look at the budgetary allocations, you will recognize that the communities that are won by us, the ADNUAFC of the is a part, there are little or no allocation to them. The chain of Region 10, a region we would have won, pointed out clearly that they refuse many of the proposals and they marginalize the region. So when one is talking about Guyana, one has to recognize that Guyana is not a democratic society. What the government does is it practices dictatorship, but it speaks as if there's a title to land. They were left with those lands, and the government did not even attempt to take. And so it's a clear manifestation of racism. But they do not like when you point out to them the racism of this regime. And the reality is there is not going to be proper resource allocation when the government is corrupt, when the government is incompetent. It complements that with racism. And that is where we stand in Guyana.
Segment, I want to give you this question before I cross to my co-host. You seem to have suggested that the previous budget, which you were opposed to, most of the resources were put into infrastructure. I want to use an example of our country here, Uganda. Every when the opposition, like you, have issues with the budget allocations to the infrastructure, the president of our country here in Uganda always says we must have good roads so that his farmers, as he calls them, can transport their goods from the villages to markets. Don't you think, in your view, rather in the president's view, that the reason for which they allocated lots of resources towards infrastructure was to perhaps enable the Guyanese people to be in position to have good roads and maybe good railway transport to transport their goods from their localities to perhaps any available markets?
Now, we agree that the need for infrastructure. What we are against is the discriminatory way in which it is done. For instance, regions the PPP stronghold. Last year, 282 roads to be done. 282 hole in Region 10 Linden. They did not identify 50 roads. The problem we have is not just infrastructure development, is the inequitable nature of it. In my budget presentation, I made a pronouncement that we need to build roads to link all 10 regions. That will open lands in all regions and contribute infrastructure. But the government doesn't want to do that, because when they do that, they cannot put resources in selective regions. They will have to put it across the country. And that is where the problem lies. And it is not a question of roads, bridges. It is also substandard work that was done. Our Shadow Minister Public Works pointed out in the debate that we did roads at less than 50% of the cost of what they are in roads at. And when you see the cost for roads and bridges, you know it's a recipe for corruption. So we believe it should be infrastructure. We believe in equality, and we believe corruption should be reduced. But I also say that the basis of development is human resource, and therefore more resources need to be placed in human resource development. I pointed out there was no survey done to determine which areas of the economy we need training and the government claims to be training, but training for what? If you're doing things without a plan, then we might very well end up doing what you normally do, train people, and then there are no jobs for them. So what we are stressing is the balance between infrastructural development and human resource development. We cannot support the situation where you're putting money into roads, etc. Mind you, 90% of these contracts or more in infrastructure go to one ethnic group. That also is an issue, because what you are doing is empowering one ethnic group and at the same time impoverishing another ethnic group. And the point can be asked that directly, what percentage of contracts go to Afro-Guyanese, and you will see it will not arrive anywhere close to 10% in a country in which 29.5% of the population is African Guyanese, in which 35 is Indo-Guyanese, about 13 to 16% indigenous people. And even indigenous people in Guyana are not being prepared to get contracts. I mentioned that in presentation. And so you have to take people from the coast, PPPs, carry them to the interior to do these contracts, while the people who live in those localities are deprived of developing themselves to be able to undertake contracts. The problem also is the absence of equity, a clear case of inequity in the society.
Honorable, I would want to cross to my co-host, and so that he can also give you some of the questions that he has. In particular, yes, Rogers, you could ask him.
There are not very many questions, but I wanted a bit of clarity. You have the education sector that was allocated, I think, about 94.4 billion Guyanese dollars, and you had 14% property, is it property tax, VAT, on the property, residential properties waived, literally removed, which meant that people could now afford to own homes more than mortgages. I don't understand. I want you to draw a good picture for us. How better should that have been? And also looking back at the time when you were in government, which is the previous government before this one came in force, I want you to also throw a picture on how you approached the issue of education and how you think this one is different, or how bad this one is doing compared to the one you were a part of.
First of all, it's a fact. Move VAT from 16% to 14% was our government. But the PPP talks as if they were the person that did it. They didn't. That's the first point need to be made. Secondly, I want to say to you, the government had promised, the president went to the United Nations and promised that 20% of the budget will go towards education. We know now that it is only, I think about 14%, something in that vicinity, 90-something million. Had he lifted his promise, it would have been 150-something billion, sorry, not millions. We would have allocated more to education. In our proposal, Guyana's children find difficulty going to school. Before we have our resources, and I want to make this point, when you're comparing, you cannot compare us in government when we had no oil resources with the PPP in government when they have $2 billion in the natural resource fund. That significant difference should be established. That now we have the resources, then we didn't. But even when we didn't have the resources, we proceeded to give children buses, bicycles, etc., for them to be able to go to school and to remove that cost from their parents. In my budget presentation, I call for a national schools transportation network, including both land transportation and river transportation, because a lot of our communities are riverine. Now, if we do that, that will impact directly on families, because they wouldn't have to face the transportation cost. and children of the poor who are now at home because their parents cannot afford will be able to go to school. And when this government talks about a 40,000 cash grant for school children, what it doesn't tell you is how far that will stretch. It cannot last 5 days for some children. And what you need is a system that allows our children, particularly those in poverty, to benefit. And that is why we would have had a comprehensive school feeding program targeting poor communities so that especially very brilliant children, we have a lot of brilliant children who because of poverty cannot access education. And if we can feed them, if we can give them transportation to school and take care of their basic needs, especially the children of the unemployed, because we have a large percentage of unemployed, then that reallocation of resources will contribute not only to them going to school, but also being able to achieve the educational levels they need to achieve. All this noise about money in education, I need to point out to you, about 16,000 children do the grade 6 exam. In some countries, it is all common entrance. And then by the time they arrive at high school, only about 5,000 of those children will get 5 CXC with math and English. In your case, it might be GC, I don't know what it is called, but it is the end of high school exam. What that means is about 10,000 children or more do not matriculate. Therefore are not equipped to get a job or equipped to go on to higher education. And so we would have allocated resources in a way that allows us to impact the education system, improve the outcome. What this government do is celebrate the 10 children who might do exceptionally well, as if that is the education system. The education system is the complete cohort of children, many of whom do not matriculate and will become a kind of a burden on the society because they are not prepared with the skills needed to operate in a modern democratic society. And we would have allocated resources targeting poverty, improving teacher salaries. Our teachers' salaries are ridiculous. The government gives increases to nurses. The only reason they give that is because the nurses are going to the United Kingdom, the United States, and Canada. I assume that the teachers have got to begin to go away so that they can increase. There is no structured approach to improving the lives of our teachers, our medical people, etc. And that is where the problem lies. Our human resources should be the key.
Honorable, I have. I'm afraid that we are yet to get done with this show because time isn't our ally, and most likely we shall, as we close later on in a few minutes, ask on whether we can have you back because the comments are very many. But you were talking about the improvement of the livelihood of the Guyanese, and your viewer here by the names of Mark, I don't know whether I pronounce the name well, Mark Late, says Norton government in 2015 to 2020 reduced our gold reserve from 13 billion USD to 17 million in 2020. And that you people spent the rest of the monies on wasteful spending spree. What do you have to say that you did reduce onto their gold reserve? And this is one of your viewers. But also maybe to add to this, and perhaps you could also have a response. The same person says that please ask Mr. Newton about the US 18 million oil sign on bonus, which they hid from the Guyanese people. These are some of your viewers, and surprisingly, we haven't even tackled half of the questions that we had for you. Could you please respond to your viewer?
Let me start with the last one first. I didn't hear the first question good. But in the case of the last one, it is well known that there was a signing bonus, and Ghana has a territorial controversy with Venezuela, and therefore the resources to take the matter to the World Bank, to the World Court. We have taken this matter to the World Court, and it can be established that the money is being used and continue to use to pursue Guyana's national interests as it relates to the Ghana-Venezuela territorial controversy. I didn't hear the other question. Could you repeat it quickly for me? The first question.
The first question was not on government. In 2015 to 2020, reduced our gold reserve from 13 billion USD to 17 million in 2020. That you spent the other monies in wasteful spending spree, and this is mark late.
To you, that is absolute garbage. If you go to the statistics which are online, you will see that the Ghana economy grew under us. We reduced the deficit in some regard, and we managed the Guyana economy better. Mind you, note as well that this is without oil money. The significant difference of what is happening here is we now have oil money, but what the government is doing is calling big figures, but not showing us the impact it will have on people. It's a strategy to impact the lives of people and improve their conditions. I want to say this to you with all that they are saying. Ask them if it is not true that electricity improved under us in the 5 years with less resources, and that at present we are back to a situation where there is regular blackout. Ask them if it is not true that under them child maternal deaths increase significantly. Under us between 2015 and 2020, we reduce maternal deaths. It is heading up again. To say you put a lot of money doesn't make sense. You have to assess its impact. While we were in government, we increased water to many communities and with less resources. And I want to talk about a house lot. The government talks as if they build houses, they create houses. They know they give a house lot. And when they give a house lot, the person has to find money. And the problem is they have taken no measure to ensure people can build houses. So what in essence you have is they're saying we give 40,000 house lots, but probably only 10,000 people could build. In our budget presentation, in my budget presentation, we recommend to the government that if you want to deal with poor people who can't afford a mortgage, follow us and implement a rent-to-own project in which you build a house to the person, you rent them, but the rent is going towards paying for the house, and once they would have paid off for the house becomes theirs. That allows people to get houses, but there are many people who the government allocates house lots. No, they don't ever talk about houses, they talk about house lots. What they don't say, with all this meaning infrastructure, many people are in housing areas with no roads. When we came to power in 2015, there was farm housing scheme which had no electricity, no water, no light. It's the APNU AFC, our government, that put water, light, and electricity in farm, and now people are more comfortable in farm. They continue to allocate house lots with no structured that this is without oil money. The significant difference of what is happening here is we now have oil money, but what the government is doing is calling big figures, but not showing us the impact it will have on people. It's a strategy to impact the lives of people and improve their conditions. I want to say this to you with all that they are saying. Ask them if it is not true that electricity improved under us in the 5 years with less resources, and that at present we are back to a situation where there is regular blackout. Ask them if it is not true that under them child maternal deaths increase significantly. Under us between 2015 and 2020, we reduce maternal deaths. It is heading up again. To say you put a lot of money doesn't make sense. You have to assess its impact. While we were in government, we increased water to many communities and with less resources. And I want to talk about an house lot. The government talks as if they build houses, they create houses. They know. They give a house lot. And when they give a house lot, the person has to find money. And the problem is they have taken no measure to ensure people can build houses. So what in essence you have is they say we give 40,000 house lots, but probably only 10,000 people could build. In our budget presentation, in my budget presentation, we recommend to the government that if you want to deal with poor people who can't afford a mortgage, follow us and implement a rent-to-own project in which you build a house to the person, you rent them, but the rent is going towards paying for the house. And once they would have paid off for the house becomes theirs. That allows people to get houses. But there are many people who the government allocates house lots. No, they don't ever talk about houses. They talk about house lots. What they don't say, with all this meaning infrastructure, many people are in housing areas with no roads. When we came to power in 2015, there was farm housing scheme which had no electricity, no water, no light. It's the APNU AFC, our government, that put water, light, and electricity in farm, and now people are more comfortable in farm. They continue to allocate house lots with no structured approach to delivering the facilities that are needed to build a community. And it was people contributing and donating, and the buses were given to the children of the school. So it wasn't a case of purchasing buses with the government money. So anybody said it's corruption, it's just being dishonest. That's the first thing. The pilot project for nutrition, like any pilot project, it had its positive, it had its negative. Were we in government, we were going to do the analysis and improve on it, because it was we were trying something which we think is needed, and the pilot project would have given us information that we can utilize to make it much better. And like I said to you, I'm prepared to come again. So don't see it as the last.
I have rather one or two last questions for you. I know it's not fair for me to ask you to really rate yourself on a scale of 10 as the leader of opposition, and also with your political party. How many marks will you give yourselves in regards to the dreams of your party, but also as the leader of opposition in the Congress?
Questions. I missed something in the question. 10. What is the question?
On a scale of 10, both you as an individual who leads the opposition in the Congress, but also as a political party, how many marks do you think you have? I mean, you could give yourselves for having achieved the dreams of the citizens that you lead.
I like the people to grade me. I grade myself, and what I hear from people is that they are glad the party is in the years since I've been there. The first time in a long time they've seen an active PR program of our party. I just had a meeting with the Guyanese diaspora. Our support in the diaspora has increased. We continue to engage people in our community. For years, our party didn't have an education program. We now have an education program. There are many areas that we have improved as a party. And I think by September of this year, hopefully, there are some other areas we are targeting and we want to achieve certain. And once we do that, I believe the people will continue to rate us high.
Okay, my last question before I cross to him and we close the show is to ask, in your submissions you said Guyana is a dictatorship. It's not a democracy. But this very dictatorship you're talking about, you serve therein as the leader of opposition. Have you had a room to dialogue so that you can intermarry the ideas of the opposition, which you lead, and also the government, so that you can move forward as a country and in harmony? I mean, has there been a room for you people to dialogue and perhaps share ideas on how best you can move Guyana as a country? Because if you look at the human rights violations, the other time when we hosted Mr. Rickford back, we had lots of videos of brutality, beatings, evictions. So have you people had a room to dialogue between government and the opposition for purposes of developing that noble country?
We would like to develop good relations with the government, but the government has to first of all strip itself of the discrimination against our constituency. And this is not only the African Guyanese, even Indo-Guyanese who are supportive of this party, Ambian indigenous people who are supportive of this party, feel the blunt of government dictatorial behavior. And like I said, it is well known that I refuse to shake the president's hand because I believe a shake hand must be an indication that there are cordial relationships emerging. And since there is no such relationship, because the government is dictatorial and the government is failing to deliver as a government of all people, then I think there are some basic things need to be done before we can actually talk about dialoguing, etc. And foremost among them is to end the discrimination, the political and ethnic discrimination against our members, supporters, and Guyanese who are close to the PNU AFC, and to begin to restore some semblance of democracy. At present, the police force is politicized and is controlled and directed totally by the government to take anti-opposition actions. I told you about the press, the state media, unacceptable that we can't access it. We will have to see some amount of access before we begin to improve those relations. We like to have good relations, but it cannot be at the expense of our people and allow the government, like a railway train, to carry away the resources of this country at this time of wealth.
Precisely, what did you do right that made you lose the previous elections? Because you said the government has 51% and you guys have 49%. Precisely, and then we shall definitely cross to my colleague and then we close the show. Precisely, what didn't you do right that made you lose this? Probably the other remaining.
Probably one of the things we didn't do right was our foreign policy didn't allow us to influence the administration. One of the reasons we call it an installed government is because we know the Trump administration intervened and virtually forced us to.
Yes, my colleague, and then we leave.
Okay, I have one more question, which I believe should be our last question because our time is fast. I want to understand, how do you think Africa can be of help in this whole process of trying to bring back sanity in this Ghana country? Because looking back at history, most Guyanese, some of them, of the Guyanese, are blacks, so they have heritage in Africa. How do you think Africa can be of help in this process to bring back sanity in Guyana?
The question is, how do I view Guyana and Africa? Is that the question?
Yes, how do you think Africa can help in this process to bring back.
Oh, how Africa can help. First of all, Africa has to be sensitized to our reality so that when government officials come appearing as if they like Guyanese and African Guyanese are comfortable with them, they should be shown the reality that you know what is happening. So your first is education. The second thing I think needs to be done, there are economic resources, there are rich people in Africa. They should seek to invest in Guyana to ensure that there is that economic link between Guyana and Africa. And of course, as a member of the political party that is fighting this PPP, we welcome any form of support out of Africa that will allow us, first of all, to reduce the excesses of the government and ultimately to come to power and govern in the interest of all Guyanese. One of the things they can't criticize us for is that when we're in government, we govern in the interest of all Guyanese, and there isn't this level of marginalization and discrimination that you see while the PPP is in government. Africa is on the rise, and once African leadership come together and realize the potential of Africa, then Africa will become one of the most significant areas in the world and will be able to have political, economic, and other forms of leverage to be able to help Guyana, African Guyanese as well. So to me, it is developing that relationship, developing the understanding the potential of both sides, find the confluence and make the arrangements and network and move forward. That is how I see it today.
To be honest with you, we want to thank you once again, but also our viewers that were online watching. Also ask to get back to you, please endeavor to give us balloons that we couldn't manage to forward to you, rather to read to you, so that you can respond. I'm going to have them updated, and then perhaps by God's grace, next time we meet and have you live, you will perhaps have to respond to all these questions and comments that are here, both positive and negative, in quotes. There are those who say who say that no, the honorable leader of opposition is just so good in talking, just like so many opposition members and so many. And there are those who are like, the government has issues. We shall definitely keep them for you. In our next show, we shall beg that you create time and go through all of these. We shall perhaps begin with the very ones and then have them exploited, as I can say. I cannot thank you enough, maybe to ask you to say your closing remarks, and then, yeah, we wish you, Guyanese a good day, because I'm sure it's daytime that side.
Well, we have in Guyana, the Guyanese acts from Black Panther, and so we are welcome. I want to express the view that she enjoys her stay in Guyana. I want to say to Guyanese, the opposition has a clear plan to take you out of poverty and build a better Guyana. And I want to say to you, one of us that and support us to put what they have, but I am accustomed to it. Standpoint of truth, we don't have to worry, and we are well disposed to answering your questions. And I close by saying, enjoy your day. All the people who are listening, wherever you are, enjoy your day, and I'm well disposed to come back and spend time with you. I do not shy away from questions to the press, like our president, who has not held one press conference since he is president of Guyana.
You should also prepare yourself to coming to Africa and also visit this great pearl and the great continent time soon, if you really find it useful, because I'm sure most likely you haven't stepped in Africa. So organize, perhaps we shall welcome you with the team.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, from Uganda in particular and Africa at large, we should say goodbye and wishing the Guyanese a very, very blessed day, all of us.
The People's National Congress Reform, PMCR, presents Nation Watch.